One of the forms of writing, but often we don't think of them as forms of writing, are the miracles. And the miracles by themselves can be just seen to be evidence of Jesus' ability, of Jesus' power. But when we think of them only in terms of history or power, we miss the point. Because all the gospel writers tell us that they have chosen the material to put into their gospels. They have chosen what they would actually share with us. Now, that means that why would they share just the miracles generally? They're not sharing miracles generally. What they are doing is they're actually giving us particular miracles that have happened in order to help us to learn, in order to help us to grow. Now, there's three kinds of miracles, particularly within the Gospels. We have the healings. And in the healings, we need to see that we have different kinds of healings. There are a number of people, blind people, that Jesus heals. But each one of them is different. Sometimes he just speaks a word and they are healed. At other times, he spits on the ground and makes mud and puts it in the person's eyes and have to go and wash out their eyes in order to be able to see. Each of the healings are different. And what we need to realize is that that difference is what makes all the difference in terms of interpretation. So we have the healings, which is the physical concepts of healing. Then we have the exorcisms, the casting out of demons, of evil spirits. Now, of course, in our modern age, the casting out of demons has receded into a particular part of the church. Most of the mainline churches now would have very little to do with the concept of exorcisms and being able to talk about that. But of course, in the Pacific, the concepts of the fight between good and evil and the effect of demons on people is still profound. But again, the concepts here of exorcisms are particular things that happen, particular stories. They're not just general exorcisms. There's the one that happens in a synagogue, or there's the one that happens in Gentile land, and of course the demons are sent into the pigs. You'll notice that each of them, even the exorcisms, there's a slightly different perspective, a slightly different elements to each story. And then the third form of miracle are what we could call the nature miracles. And these are the things that are supernatural. So the things, for example, of walking on the water, or stilling a storm, or changing 5 loaves and 2 fish into enough bread and fish to feed 5,000 people. Those nature miracles, again, are very specific in the things that they are trying to teach. What I'm trying to say is that instead of looking at the healings or the exorcisms or the nature miracles as history, what we really need to be doing is applying the same tools to them that we would apply to parables. That instead of asking, did this happen? Or even, how did this happen? The question that we need to ask is, why? Why does this happen? Why does the gospel writer tell us this in a particular way? Why is this written this way? Why is it here at all? Why did they choose that story to be shared with the church of faith? Remember that these miracle stories are not there to prove Jesus. They're also not there to convince us to follow Jesus. Because if that was the case, then we would be no better than the people who were fed at the feeding of the 5,000, who wanted to come and make Jesus king by force. Why did they want to make him king? Well, because he was their supplier of bread. They could sit on the green grass all day and be fed by Jesus. How wonderful would that be? That's not what Jesus is offering. And that must also not be what we understand by the miracles. The miracles were not there to create faith. The miracles are not there in order to give us a sense of the power and the ability of Jesus. The concepts of the power and ability of Jesus should come out of our relationship with him, rather than just because the Bible tells us what he could do. The writing of these miracle stories, whether they be healings or exorcisms or nature miracles, are there in order to teach us discipleship, in order to teach us to grow in our relationship. And therefore we need to, just like the parable onion, we need to be uncovering what is it that the meaning that is within those stories. Let's stop looking at those stories just from the outside and gasping in wonder about how great Jesus is, and yet still not understanding. Notice that that's in fact how Jesus looked at his disciples, that he couldn't believe that even after doing all these things, they still did not understand. Yes, they adored him. Yes, they were in awe of him, but they didn't understand. What the Scripture wants us to do is to not just be in awe of Jesus. What the Scripture wants us to do is to see what Jesus did, and through it begin to understand what we are meant to be as disciples and how we are meant to live as disciples in this world.